Yeah, my name is Jeff Morrison. I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association. I first just want to say welcome to all of you and thank you so much excuse me, for agreeing to be a part of this inaugural tenant leadership group. This was an idea, a concept that we tried out earlier in the year. We applied for some funding to make it happen through a group called the Community Housing Transformation Center. We were successful, and so here we are today. So we're incredibly thankful for all of you for being part of this first cohort of what we hope is possibly to be a repeating or a repetitive program. I think we were a bit, frankly, surprised at how many people and how many applications, in fact, we did accept, or we did receive, many more than what we had thought originally. So you were all evaluated and were really deemed to be deserving of being part of this initial cohort of aspiring and current tenant leaders. So we hope this is something we can repeat in the future. With that, I will also take a moment to introduce my colleague, Dominika Krzyminska. And Dominika, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I think you've heard from me a little bit by email. So this is where you get to put a face to the name and to the emails. I'm Dominika Krzyminska, and I am the Director of Programs and Strategic Initiatives at CHRA. To just reiterate what Jeff said, I'm very excited with this group starting, and I'm excited to see where we can take it, and the the various programs and resources and whatnot that we'll be able to offer, and hopefully, and I'm sure it will be, great things that come out of this group. So again, hi everyone.
And Dominika, did you want to take a moment just to describe this webinar technology, just for folks maybe not who haven't used it or not familiar with it?
For sure, yeah. So as you have noticed, you are all muted right now. Some of you have already played with the mute buttons, which is great. And we do this to ensure that background noise doesn't really come in. When we do move into the introductions and the discussions, you'll be able to freely unmute yourself. I don't have to do that for you, but if I see you speaking and not hear you, I might just do that. If you've called in for audio, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6 and mute yourself by pressing *6. So if you have questions or would like to make a comment at any time during this meeting, because this is this meeting is meant to be an introduction and also a back and forth discussion with yourselves, the participants, you can either raise your virtual hand, which if you go down to the bottom of the Zoom screen, there's a little participants icon. If you click that, there should be, as one of the options, Terry just gave a thumbs up. That is one of the options. The other is a raise hand. If you can't find it, that's fine. You can type your question, or that you have a question, into the chat box, which is to the right of your screen. If you're on the phone and you want to raise your hand, it's *9. So *6 for muting, *9 to raise your hand. And like I said, alternatively, you can type in your questions or comments into the chat box and we'll read them out, or we'll call on you to ask your question. So last thing is, depending on how many people show up today, although I think this group might be big enough, we're going to be using breakout rooms today for that item number 5, where we're discussing the actual resources and programs that this group will have over the next 8 months. So when the time comes, you'll be prompted to move into your assigned breakout room, but we'll let you know when that is. Just choose OK, and it'll do it for you. And then once the time is up for that breakout room, you'll just be sent back into the main room. Just a quick question, you could put your hand up because I could see everyone. Terry, you can type into the chat box, and Deanna as well. Is anyone using a Chromebook today as your laptop or your computer, a Chromebook? No. Okay, then we're not going to have any issues. Any questions before we move on any of the technology or anything that I just said? Okay, Jeff, back to you.
Great. So as Dominica mentioned, the purpose of today is in part to provide a bit of an introduction to the program and to take you through what has been planned thus far. However, as Dominica also mentioned, we don't really want to talk that much. This is hopefully the most that we actually speak. At a point in a few minutes, we want to turn it over to you. First of all, to have each of you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourself. But then also we want to pose a couple questions to you because we have really put together what I would call the skeleton of a program. There are a couple first steps that have been planned out. However, we want to make this program as responsive and value added for each of you as we can. And so there are some of the components and the topic areas that frankly we haven't planned out simply because we want to hear your feedback and really understand what would be of most use to you. So we'll get to that in a few minutes. Before we do that though, I just will take a few more minutes to present and to take you through a bit of essentially the program overview for the coming, not quite year, but for the coming roughly 10 months or so. And to do that, I'll be referring to the orientation guide that I believe you should have all received by now. And I think Dominica may be putting on a couple of the pages on the screen so that you can all see it for yourselves. So in terms of what this program is all about, as you know, because you've all applied, this is really designed to increase the tenant leadership capacity across Canada. This was a stated goal of the federal government when it announced its national housing strategy 2 years ago. But what we find is that the tenant community, although it's incredibly important, it needs to be represented, it needs to have a solid voice. That oftentimes in many communities there was seen as a bit of a lack of capacity within the tenant community. And so this program is designed to really provide some support and resources to tenants who have already demonstrated leadership within your communities. So that's really what this is all about. So how do we intend to proceed with this program? Well, today is really the first step. It's a chance for all of you to not only introduce yourselves to your fellow participants, but also a chance for you to provide some feedback and thoughts about the kind of issues, the kind of specific training or resources that you feel would be helpful to enhance your tenant leadership capabilities. Having said that, we've identified a couple first steps really just to get the ball rolling. So after today, there will be a session that will be planned most likely for August that we're calling Leadership and Strategy. So this is a fairly high level presentation that we'll be scheduling next month that will really focus on leadership capacity. We'll likely bring in a speaker or speakers to focus on really on the concept of leadership and what's entailed. The other next step that we have planned out is to provide you with really a self-directed course on housing policy. We have consulted with a couple tenant leaders. We've consulted with a couple of yourselves in terms of what are sort of the bigger picture resources and items that you'd like to get out of this course. And the thing we heard from just about everyone was more information, more training, if you will, on housing policy. And by that, we mean not only what kinds of policies are in place that particularly impact upon community housing, that particularly impact upon tenants, but also the kind of the more activist role, which is how do you influence policy? How do you change policy? How do you do it in a multi-jurisdictional setting? So how do you change housing policy at a local level, at a provincial level, even a federal or national level? So there will be a course that will be provided that will really take you through that, and more information about that course will come in the next couple weeks. It will be a combination of some virtual presentations as well as some reading materials. That's essentially it in terms of the planned topics. We had, at least at a high level, a vision for some additional topics on things such as public speaking, strategic planning, diversity in housing, etc. But just to be clear, that is just tentative at this point. That will all depend on the feedback that you'll be providing to us today. So nothing is really set in stone beyond that housing course that I referred to. Over the winter, so sort of in that January to March timeframe, again, we had envisioned providing some, again, training, some resources, some speakers focused more on tenants issues. So things such as what are tenant rights, tenant legal considerations, how you engage with fellow tenants and organizations. The idea was to possibly present some case studies, hear from some tenant representatives from across the country. But again, just to be clear, that's nothing of that is set in stone. That's being put forth as essentially a very high level proposal. That will depend on the feedback that you provide to us today, which we'll take back and then really kind of flesh out that remaining component. If you call it the last step, or maybe not last step, but really the climax of this program, if you will be a face-to-face meeting, which at present is planned for April, I have to get the dates right, April 27th to 29th in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador. Those are the dates of our CHRA National Congress. So by being accepted to this program, you are essentially all invited to attend this conference put on by CHRA. At the conference, there will be some dedicated sessions specifically for this group, likely bringing in a couple external speakers, again, depending on the kind of topics and the kind of areas that you would like to get. But you would also be part of the overall Congress. So you would not only have a chance to take part in sessions specifically for yourselves, but in the overall Congress. And so you could take part in whatever, workshops, plenaries, social events, etc., that you would like. Somebody asked the question, what about the costs with that? The answer is this program will cover your costs to travel to Newfoundland. So flights, hotels, food, incidentals, etc. The program we've been provided with the funds to send you all. So you don't have to worry about cost. The one thing I will say, and this is a huge caveat, is of course, as you all know, we're in the midst of this pandemic. It is at this point, as of July, it is still unclear whether we're able to proceed with a face-to-face large conference in Newfoundland next April or not. A lot of that is just completely out of our hands. Likely will depend on where the world is at with a vaccine and so forth. We will be making a decision as to whether we can proceed with a face-to-face conference in Newfoundland by the end of this year. So around December, about Christmas time, we should make that decision once we have a clear picture, frankly, of where the world is at and whether we're allowed to proceed with conferences such as this. So I would say don't make any flight arrangements just yet. We'll provide more information about travel, about the program lineup, etc. Later in the year, again, once there's a bit more clarity on our part as to whether we can actually proceed with this conference. And as you can all imagine, we're crossing our fingers, our toes, anything we have, hoping that this pandemic will have subsided to allow us to proceed with that conference in Newfoundland. The last thing I'll mention is that, of course, we know that part of the value of this program is the opportunity for all of you to connect with each other on an ongoing basis. We'll be holding these kind of presentations or sessions on average about once a month. But the reality is you may want to connect with each other, in between those times. In addition, there's a whole range of resources out there that we're starting to collect that we want to make available to all of you as just that, as a resource. And so at the end of the call today, we're just going to get your feedback on essentially what is the most effective and the easiest formats in which we can share written materials with all of you on a whole range of topics. So in other words, how can we make available to you an online library of materials? And B, what's your preferred format in terms of connecting with each other on an ongoing basis? We've thrown out the idea, for example, of a Facebook chat group. It could be pretty much anything, and Dominica will talk a little more about that later on. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, that's where we stand with this group. Again, there's still some gaps to be filled in terms of where we go from here, but we didn't want to fill in all these gaps without hearing from all of you first. So before moving on then to hearing from you, I know I've talked long enough. I'll just stop there and ask if anyone has any questions or comments about the program, the lineup, or anything that we just discussed. Seeing heads saying no, so okay. So with that then, and thank you for allowing me to take up a bit of time. So we want to now hear from you. So I think, as Dominica mentioned in the agenda, we'll kind of go through the list of people on the call. And Dominique, I suppose the easiest way is we could probably just name folks so that it's clear who's being asked to speak when. And in doing so, we would just ask if you could say who you are, where you're from. And one thing we're really keen on is if you could identify at least one goal or one objective of what you're hoping to accomplish by being a part of this program. Again, that will help us plan out kind of the best kind of formats and resources that we can make available to you. And of course, if you have anything else you want to share, by all means, this is a chance for us for everyone to get to know everyone else.
And just before we start, I do want to acknowledge that there's at least one or two people who are going to be typing their responses into the chat box. So when we get to those people, I will be happy to read them out. Sorry, I can't sound like you, but but I will read out those responses. So if, I know there's at least one or two people. Okay. Do you want me to call out people,
Sure,
Jeff?
sure.
All right, I'm just gonna do it as I see people on my screen. So I'm not, I'm not randomly choosing. So I see Lisa as the first person. Lisa, if you want to unmute yourself and introduce yourself to us.
Like, please don't be first.
Sorry.
First, that's all good. Okay, so let's see. My name is Lisa Hollingshead. I live in Ottawa. I guess, I'm not sure, I guess most of us are tenants, obviously, and many of us live in not-for-profit housing. In my case, I live in a CCOC owned property, a non-for-profit housing organization. I'm involved with on their tenant and engagement committee, and also there's a new little group that's being formed for tenants helping tenants that I'm trying to be a part of, and that's been really interesting to engage with a lot of fellow tenants that way, see where we can support one another. In my day job, I work for the Dementia Society, so I do a lot of fundraising work. I help like community groups and third parties do fundraisers for us. I help connect people with resources, like speaking engagements. I, generally act as like an ambassador to the organization. I help do event planning. I plan our biggest fundraiser of the year, the Walk for Dementia, which had to be, is going online, of course. So it's been a really weird time. A lot of my, focus has been in large events, in-person events, and obviously that's all changing. So I'm really looking forward to engaging. And my other passion is advocating for more equitable housing. There's just a housing crisis in this country that's been going on and on and on, and this is maybe an opportunity in these crazy times to actually make some realistic changes, making sure that people have access to affordable housing. So I'm really excited to be able to learn more about housing policy and how I could advocate for more basically more housing and more access to housing. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. Nice to meet you. Very nice to meet you.
I was supposed to talk there, but
no, that was perfect timing. You're getting thumbs up from Kathleen.
And by the way, Lisa, it was just coincidence that you were the first to talk, because if you live in a CCOC property, both Dominica and I live in Centertown, Ottawa as well. So you're one of our neighbors.
Door neighbors, amazing.
Yes. All right. I think Laura, it's your turn.
Thank you for unmuting me.
I did it just because I'm going down the list. I'm like, unmute.
Thank you.
No worries.
I'm Laura, obviously. I live in Peterborough at a place called the Mount Community Center, which is, my life really opened up for me when I moved in here. I've said, and the Mount has asked me to speak to a couple of organizations, and I've said to them what I say to you. This is when my life shifted from surviving to thriving. Because of my tenancy here, I've been invited to participate in this group, and I have also connected with a group called Bedford House, which moved a bunch of us tenants through the Getting Ahead program, which is about moving out of poverty. And then we have moved together into a bridging team, Bridges Out of Poverty. This is my other major involvement. So it's like 3 Zoom meetings a week usually. We also do storytelling, and we're learning to podcast because that's what we need to do now. So this is really important to me, because what I would like to get out of this personally is leadership skills, because I have plans for the future that will require those. And for my friends and neighbors, this is a really inclusive facility, and there's a wide spectrum of mental health issues, addiction issues, and a lot of them, of course, have become more emphatic, shall we say, throughout this period of high stress. And we all are, this building's managed by Peterborough Housing, so we all signed a lot of regulation sheets of things that we had to initial about how to respect our building and the property, but there was virtually nothing in there about how to respect each other. And some of us, need to learn that. So what I would like to do is create a document that will help everybody here respect each other, and we'll also create a framework for expectations of people moving in, and if things are absolutely not working, a way to move people on to housing that would suit them better. So all of that, of course, without infringing on anyone's human rights. So this is my project. Thank you.
Very, very busy and very ambitious, Laura. I muted you just because there is an echo right now between the two of us, but you have at least one comment in the group chat saying "cat!" exclamation point, because you have a cat. It's very cute. All right, the next person that I can see is Kathleen. Kathleen, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm from sunny Okanagan, Kelowna, BC. I've been on my kayak all day yesterday and going right after this again. Yes, I'm proud First Nations woman from Lower Similkameen Indian Band. I'm in the Isbayou, Kelowna Friendship Societies and CMHA's housing project. I love it here. I've been here for 2 years. I know so many people, they're like family. It's all, our whole building's a family. Like we'll meet down for cribbage, and I want to educate them more. And that's mostly is education so that I can transfer that or have the answers to the questions that are asked of me. I'm inspired by Laura and Lisa. Wow, I'm just inspired by all you do. And I have so many questions for you because I just want to start these groups and tenant groups with everybody in the building, you know, and help with childcare. There's so many single moms. They like, it's really hard for them to come to meetings, even Zooms, when you've got 2-3 kids running around, and I don't know, some sort of childcare within the building as well, right? I just want to help people, I guess. That's my main goal. Education, give me leadership skills to transfer and have all the answers for the questions that are asked of me, because so many times I say, I don't know, and I hate to have to say, I don't know to anyone. I want to have the answer right away. And so education, self-development to do that for my people. And that's all. I love you all. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Kathleen, and hopefully we'll be able to provide those skills and the resources that you're looking for. So next, and I see your hat, and I'm already happy. I should have worn my Saskatchewan hat, but I see James. James, if you want to unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is James Maillard, living at Rainbow Housing Co-op here in Saskatoon. I got involved co-op housing in 2002 when I moved in here, and I married my current wife. As soon as I moved in, got involved with maintenance committee, personnel committee, all kinds of different other committees. 2 years after I moved in, I got elected to our own board of directors. A year after that, the national board of directors of CHF Canada. I am now serving my 10th year on the CHF Canada board of directors, and most likely will be my last. I also have served on the board for the Cooperative Housing Association of Saskatchewan for 6 years as president. I just retired as president of the board of directors here at Rainbow. I also served as a delegate for the Cooperatives Insurance and the Saskatchewan Cooperative Association, of which now I'm also on their board of directors. I also served on the Saskatoon Community Clinic board of directors for a couple of years. My main concern is how do we get the youth involved in social housing? Everybody that seems to move in here, all they're in here for is for the cheap rent. That is it. Their own little world. They don't care about anybody else. I'm soon to retire within the next 5 years, and when we do, me and my wife are planning moving to the West Coast. And I'm scared that without the education for these youth, the co-op housing in Saskatchewan will fail, especially in the family co-ops. Seniors co-ops are fine. I have no worries about them, but it's the family co-ops in Saskatchewan that I'm worried about, that the youth won't get involved and become either on the board or serve on different committees. So that's my ultimate goal, is member involvement and more government relations. Thank you.
Thank you, James. All right, now I'm going to read. I guess I'll introduce Terry Meehan. So Terry Meehan is from Ottawa, from Centertown, Ottawa. So another neighbor of ours. And Terry says that she has decades of social activism at all levels, having started mainly around anti-poverty, and also that she has public speaking. I think she means experience there, as well as disability and housing security projects. So I think Terry is saying that those are things that she needs help with. There we go. She helped me provide that answer. That's what she's looking for. Those are her goals. So it's about public speaking, and then also disability and housing security projects. Terry lives with a huge cat. I really want to know how big that cat is. And an 18-pound service dog in training. And I often see Terry with her service dog in Ottawa, and they are the cutest pair ever, is all I have to say, Terry. 16-pound Maine Coon is the cat. All right, Terry, that was your introduction. Please let me know if I missed anything in there. And I'm going to move on to Kathy. Kathy, you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay, I have an earpiece in because I can't hear so well without it. So I'm Kathy. I live in Markham, Ontario, north of Toronto in York Region. I live in a federal housing co-op. I've lived in co-op housing for 28 years. And in this current co-op, I've lived for the last 19 years. So my kids have grown up here, and my youngest son has just recently moved back into the co-op with his wife. So the second generation family. So I think I serve on our board of directors. I've served on the on the Cooperative Housing Federation of Toronto's board of directors for 4 years. Very interested in it's very broad sort of, but in terms of a goal, but lack of affordable housing for seniors, for the disabled community, whether that's intellectual, physical, or mental health issues. We have a small community within our community here at Raymers Wood, and we have 4 intellectually disabled couples that live here, my son and daughter-in-law being one of those couples. So they get support from the community and then support from the larger community out in Markham. But one of the things is that our co-op has been here for 36 years, and we are the only co-op housing in Markham. There's never been another one built. So I think I'm interested in looking at why that's happened. What can we do to sort of move ahead, and the steps to go through that. I have some contacts, but just I think I want to learn more about what the best way that would be about going about it, building a group of people to work with, and I'm hoping I'll get some answers here. So in my other life, when I'm not doing co-op housing, like Laura, I also work with seniors, and I work in a long-term care facility where I work in a standalone program that's a day program for seniors with early onset dementia. But at the moment, I'm on a leave of absence from work due to health concerns, and have no idea when I'm going to get back. I'm in month 3 at home, so that's me.
Thank you, Kathy. Very nice to meet you. So next on my screen is Tom. Tom, you can unmute yourself.
Hey, everyone. I guess you can hear me. Good. So I'm Tom, and my neighbors and I, we are running 21 units at Gromada Housing Co-op. It's located in Edmonton, heart of Edmonton, Old Strathcona. Beautiful place to live. So I'm part of the co-op since 2015, when I moved to Edmonton from Montreal. Last year I'm leading maintenance committee, and I am part of the executive board. My goal in general is to learn about the background and development opportunities of community housing in Canada. Just because I found it fascinating. It's great to actually run a part of a neighborhood. Yeah, as you mentioned, making friendship, being very close to people, feel the support. But I found also that this is the moment I really would like to learn more, where I am at from the bigger perspective or wider perspective. Thank you.
I'm talking, see, I do it to myself. I don't unmute myself. Next is Eddie, for anyone that could have read my, my lips, and thank you, Tom.
Oh, hi. Good morning, everybody. I'm Eddie Sabil or Eddie Sabile from sunny 8-degree Vancouver weather. But first, I would like to recognize and acknowledge the unceded lands of the Squamish, Musqueam, and the Susalewutu First Nations, where we play and work. Um, so basically, I would like to continue my advocacy in particular with affordable housing. I just turned out from the Cooperative Housing Federation of British Columbia, where I served on the board for 6 years. And I will be terming out in November, this coming November, after an 8-year term from my own cooperative housing, which is the Killarney Gardens Housing Cooperative. And it is one of the largest cooperative housing in British Columbia, where there are 227 units of apartments and townhouses. So we have a big community here, and it is 9 years ago when my young family moved in here. Um, it really woke me up in the needs of to be in a community like this, where you interact with a lot of people, because this is basically where I came from the Philippines. This is how we lived. We live in a community, and where we see people all the time. From the moment that you wake up in the morning, you see people and you interact with them and everything. And then it was a big shock when I came to Canada, and I was basically without a family, and then I didn't even like I had neighbors, but I couldn't even say, when I say hello to them, they kind of like as if I'm sort of like weird. And then sooner or later, I found out why they react that way sometimes. So, but anyways, so I'd like to continue my advocacy in particular about homelessness. I have, as probably everybody knows, there's a big problem of homelessness in Vancouver, in particular in British Columbia, because a lot of people tend to come to the West Coast because of its weather and good. That's why when I heard James that him and his wife is coming to the West Coast when he retires next year. James, we're going to be waiting for you. We will welcome you in the West Coast. And but anyways, I have lived basically. I've been in Canada for 40 years, and so far so good. I've lived in the East in Toronto. I've lived in Jasper National Park, and I've lived now. I now live with my young family in Vancouver, British Columbia. So I have, besides my advocacy in affordable housing, I also I also advocate and is active with the needs of the seniors, where I am a member of the Aging Committee, Aging in Place Committee in Vancouver, where we advocate for the needs of our seniors in particular. And believe it or not, I am considered a senior. I'm already a senior, although I only have 2 young daughters who are only 20 and 21 years old. That's because I married very, very late. That's basically it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. Very nice to meet you. Next on my screen is Yuri. Yuri, it's your turn. You just have to unmute yourself.
Hi, I'm Yuri Artemis. I go by the pronouns of he and him. I am living on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish, otherwise known to settlers as Vancouver. I live in First Avenue Athletes Village Housing Cooperative, which I've been here for 9-ish years now. And at the time, it was the first new co-op in BC in over 25 years. So I've served on the board of my home Athletes Village Co-op several years, 2 terms. I'm currently serving as the treasurer. I've also been involved with the Cooperative Housing Federation of BC, served for 6 years initially, then termed out served several of those years with Eddie, actually. And then I'm back on the board, CHFBC board again this year. One of the reasons I'm on the CHFBC board again is because I really believe in their work and what they're doing, not only to represent existing cooperative housing, but to build new, both cooperative and other forms of social and nonprofit housing. In the last 7-8 years, we've built or are building over 2,600 new units in BC, which is, again, after 25 years of building next to nothing. It's been great to be part of that. I've also, so my day job is I work for the City of Vancouver as the Executive Director of the Vancouver City Planning Commission, where we look at the long-term future of Vancouver, which is hard to extricate and separate from housing, and especially workforce and social and affordable housing. I also serve on the board of Rooftops Canada, which is the cooperative housing, our international wing in Canada. So we work on developments in the global south, focusing right now on South Africa, and hopefully after this pandemic is over, we'll be doing on some other projects in sub-Saharan Africa and several other countries. Some of my interests too are, I was recently diagnosed, a year and a half ago, with multiple sclerosis. So I have a growing interest in disability and accessibility issues, especially with regards to social and community-owned housing. I think it's imperative that we make all our housing accessible for everybody in all phases of life. Traditionally, a lot of co-op housing and social housing in BC, at least, and I assume other places, has been townhouses and row houses with lots of stairs and kind of awkward configurations for especially people who need to maneuver. So I'd like to see some of that looked at more seriously. And also with my work at the city and actually my own co-op and what's going on internationally, but especially in North America with the anti-racism movement, I think, again, the inclusion and the acceptance of diversity, not only of race, but of abilities, and also most pressingly, I see in my own co-op, of privilege, where we come from and how we interact with not only each other, but the broader world. There's a lot of tensions that are forming, and they kind of do form in a lot of social housing and co-op housing. I see as people who have been privileged to live in co-op housing for a long time, and versus those who are new or who need additional housing. So those are some of the things I'm personally and professionally interested in. I'm here because I really want to network with people across Canada. I want to learn what's going on in other parts of Canada. I want to share what BC is doing in other parts of Canada. And I really, quite frankly, I lived in Ottawa, worked for the federal government for several years, and I realized what kind of the policy bubble that Ottawa is and can be. And I hope to burst that bubble, at least in with our CHRA and the housing community there, and show that there's life beyond the Queensway. So that's me, and I guess you'll get to learn more about me as time goes on.
Great, thank you so much, Yuri. I see, George, you joined the call. Welcome. We're just going through introductions. When I get to you, I'll call you, you'll unmute yourself, and we're just introducing ourselves and stating what our goal, or what the goal, one or more of your goals are for this program. All right, so next on my screen is Hillary. Hillary, do you want to introduce yourself? If you're called in, it's just *6 to unmute yourself. Yeah, we hear you now.
There I am.
Perfect.
Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. Shalom. I'm happy and privileged to be here on the unceded territories of the Esquimalt, Songhees, and the Lekwungen speaking peoples. And this is where I eat, work, play, and do all my advocacy. So I am very honored. Thank you very much for choosing me as one of these many people here who have so much to include. And that is one of the things that I fight for here in Victoria, British Columbia. And it's not so hot here. So if you people in the East could send us some warm weather, that would be amazing. I love public speaking. I'm a fabulous public speaker. So I know that someone wanted help with that. I'm okay with that. I live in not-for-profit housing, low income. I've been in the low income housing for 25 years. I find a lot of discrepancies with each housing society, and I have a curiosity as to how and why housing societies actually work and how they make policies and procedures. And it usually means that the tenants are the ones getting the shitty end of the stick, excuse my French. My big thing is also to empower others. I've been an advocate in Victoria for quite some time. I'm experiential in the sex trade. I'm experiential in homelessness. I'm experiential in drug addiction, alcohol addiction. I'm experiential in battered wives syndrome. I'm experiential in a whole lot of things that sometimes I wish I wasn't, but it does give me a lot of room to play with a lot of things that I get involved with. I was the a board member of Together Against Poverty Society here in Victoria for 10 years. I'm an advocate who fights for social justice all around the board. I was on a committee with the Minister of Social Development and Poverty Reduction here, Minister Shane Simpson, who were trying to eradicate poverty. We've been living under Liberal rule here in BC for 16 years. And then a Conservative government with Canada for God knows how long. So we don't have any housing anywhere in Canada that's been newly built. And because of the COVID virus, which I'm very grateful for, it has opened the eyes of how much homelessness, mental health, and poverty are so rampant in our communities, and that COVID has brought it to the forefront. So the one silver lining, I'm grateful for COVID in that way, that we can't hide homelessness and we can't hide poverty anymore. And our mental health, closing our mental health facility, Riverview, a few years ago, has created havoc on our streets. And it's really unfair to the people who are struggling with mental health issues. It's unfair to the people who have addictions. It's unfair to the community itself. And so I'm looking for ways to push for more housing faster. I'm looking to empower people with advocacy skills, which I have a lot of. I'm all for housing first. I think that we need to build housing fast, and we need people to be stable and secure. And I also believe that in the housing industry, people are only given two choices as to a housing, which one. If you don't pick the first one, you have to pick the second one. And if neither one of those are suitable for you, you're kind of stuck. So I'm kind of hoping to open up the provisions, as you may say, of social housing and build faster, build more, and give people more options and things to choose from. I've also been with the Coalition to End Homelessness. I was the peer co-chair for 4 years. I've gone to, I don't know how many Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness conferences. I've been to 2 peer support conferences. I'm all for peer support in housing and homelessness. I think it works great in mental health, but I think we also need to advocate for peer support in low-income housing and housing for people in general to help them to get through the system and what they need, because most systems don't tell people what they need or what they can have. And I like to know everything I possibly can know in order to pass that information on to people, so empowering them. I'm a single parent. My daughter's moved out. And that's another thing that I don't like about housing, is that if you are, your children have moved out, all of a sudden you can find yourself homeless in your senior age, which there's nothing to stop you from falling into homelessness when your children leave home. So I'm sure I've got lots of other things to say, but I think that's basically it. I'm just a big advocate. I'm a big mouth. I push for whatever I believe in for people. I love all my fellow men and women, and I think that we all deserve housing. I think we all deserve to be out of poverty. I think that our governments need to be pushed a lot more, and I am here to be one of those people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Hillary, and we're super excited and happy to have you join us. Just gonna mute you now, just letting you know. All right, next on my screen is Lindsay. Lindsay, you can unmute yourself.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lindsay Murphy. I'm coming from Vancouver, so the unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh Nation. I'm talking now. I have a 3 and a 6-year-old who are home. Thanks to COVID, we don't have summer camps right now, so they'll be joining me today and probably fairly frequently during the Zooms. I am currently living in Inti Housing Co-op, which is located on the west side of Vancouver. It's a small co-op, about 20 units. So we have, there's some advantages. We're all a very tight-knit community. Some disadvantages in that, there's only 20 of us to do the jobs that are available. So from the time we moved in, I've been on the board of directors here. I'm currently in my first term with CHF Canada as a director. And I've been home with my kids for 3 years now, and trying to get back into the workforce is a challenge. And one thing that I've become passionate about working with them and meeting other families in Vancouver, trying to find family housing that is affordable is next to impossible. So that's really become a strong passion of mine, and I'm hoping to get into more nonprofit work and advocacy. So I'm here to learn from all of your experience. It sounds like everybody has so much experience, so I'm eager to learn from all of you. I need to get a better understanding of policy creation, and then also given the challenges of COVID, I would like to learn more about social media campaign and getting community engagement through social media, just because in person is a little difficult to do right now. So I think that's everything.
Great, thank you. And I'm glad we have 2 other participants joining you in these meetings. It's awesome. All right, Lindsay, I'm just gonna mute you. Perfect, you muted yourself. Next on my list here is Deanna. Deanna, do you wanna introduce yourself? You gotta unmute yourself. Perfect. Deanna, we can't hear you if you're speaking. Nope. Deanna, just to let you know, I assume you can hear us because you're still on the call. If you'd like to type into the chat box your response, I'll move on to the other people, and then I'll try to figure out, I'll send you a little reply about joining through your phone like we chatted about. All right, I'm gonna mute you now, and then just type in your response to the chat in the chat box while we move on to Adam.
Hi, everyone. My name is Adam. I've been a tenant in BC, Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec. I've experienced lots of different types of housing, so shelters, co-ops, streets, non-market housing, in different pieces. And one of my interests joining this group, which I'm very excited about, is related to the basic human rights of tenants, but also the rights of tenants. And I'm involved quite a bit in advocacy for new housing in my community. And I'm a big supporter of YIMBY. So I've heard lots about NIMBY, but I'm kind of tired of that being the excuse for everything and anything. So I'm getting on the YIMBY train and starting to push that. I'm a bit younger, so some of my millennial friends and I are trying to push the YIMBY movement across Canada and help communities embrace different types of housing in their community that they might have never been exposed to. So sometimes they just have that fear of the unknown. But I have actually found a lot of people to be quite reasonable and rational once we've had a conversation with them and explained what the different types of housing and what they're used to in their community actually means, and the benefits, and who the tenants are, and how we're such an integral part of the community. So that's one of my kind of goals for this group.
Thank you, Adam. We will now move on to George. George, if you want to unmute yourself.
I think that did it. Did that do it? All right. Greetings from a rainy Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories. I'm George Lassard. I'm a 68-year-old independent media artist. I got stuck in media in about 1970 when I started work as a volunteer at a community access radio station in Montreal. I've been working with community since the early 70s, actually. Feedback? Sorry, go ahead.
No, we had just, you were frozen, so I was just trying to make sure that you're...
That happens. Let me know and I'll repeat myself.
Okay.
And please, I fully expect I talk a lot because I do, so when I go over my time, let me know and I'll wrap up quick. Just that's the background. That's when it started, understanding what's going on in the rest of the community outside my family and outside my immediate people. And that certainly opened my eyes in Montreal, because I'm from Montreal. As most people in Northwest Territories who weren't born here, we come from away, of course. I've been in social housing here in the Yellowknife since 2015.
It's 12 o'clock.
Hello. That's mountain time. And been on income assistance here. So I've kind of...
ESL.
Sorry. I'll have to turn that down eventually. Another one might come, sorry. So I'm very familiar with the social system, if some people call it that here, and its limitations, especially a lot of its limitations with respect to recognizing people's rights as human beings under our human rights code here in the territories, which is actually different a bit than others. So it's actually quite interesting. We get to complain about a little bit more than the rest of the country does. Family associations, for instance, are part of our human rights code. You can't discriminate because of your family, because we got lots of families in small communities here. There is no tenants association of any sort. There are a lot of issues. The Housing Corporation of the Northwest Territories gives all the money to local housing authorities in the 16, 17, 18, I forget, communities we have. Smallest communities, about 250 people. Largest is Yellowknife with 20,000 people. Poverty rate in Yellowknife at last count was about 10%. It's very high. We have, Yellowknife has, at one point, not so many years ago, highest per capita income of any city in Canada. But the poverty rate is visible here because it's a small town. It may be the capital, which is kind of good because people who want to lobby politicians, they all here in town. You see them on the streets. You go, hey, minister, excuse me. So sometimes that works. I have 2 human rights cases with the Housing Corporation. One with income assistance, settled some time ago. Unfortunately, at that time here, I did not realize about the non-disclosure clause. So although the situation resolved and they stopped limiting individuals who had no dependents to $900 a month rent, which they had been doing for years, discriminatorily, is that a word, against single people, because anyone with any dependent of any sort got full market value rent, but individuals were limited to $900 a month. Well, that's gone. In a press release, one line, we did this, we're so nice, but legally I'm not allowed to say why. And they get away with not saying we abrogated the tenants' rights. Of course, they also limit their responsibility going back years for that. There is no tenants association of any sort here. There are housing, social housing tenants in every community in the territory, all of them, all the fly-in only communities, all the few communities on the highway, and they all have housing issues and housing problems. Any social housing is many years old, out of date, and costs, I don't know what, but hundreds of thousands of dollars more than the South, because it all gets shipped in by train or barge or boat or ice road to get to the communities once a year in most communities, because there's only one shipment a year. And if your house is not on it that year, it ain't there that year. There's lack of social housing in every community in the territory. In all the territories, there's lack of housing. Nunavut's much worse. It's very common to see a 3-bedroom house with 10, 15 people on mattresses on the floor, because there is no other building to be housing in your community. Sorry. Hi, I'm George. Okay.
And George, what is your goal for joining this program? That's the other part of the question.
Agitation? Movement of some sort? I don't know. But talking about it is the best way to start, you know? And that's that can be one way. And if this gives me some more ability to do that and maybe get something going, that's fine. If somebody else does it, I don't care. One here must advocate for oneself, because ain't nobody else that does. That's probably true everywhere. But here there's some issues that go further behind that. There's the systemic racism of a colonial system that came up from Ottawa directly here as the civil service, whose rules, regulations, and buddy system hasn't really seemed to have changed much since that happened in what was it, 67, I think the capital came up here, not that long ago anyway. We do have an assembly. There are no political parties, so we have to lobby each individual member. Our head minister, our premier, is elected by the assembly, and so too is the cabinet elected by the assembly. So there is the power of recall to ministers and the premier by a majority vote of the assembly, which has never happened here, but did happen once in Nunavut, because they've got the same system we do. Nonpartisan, yay, it's very interesting. It's kind of like city politics, only for 45,000 people. By the way, that's the other thing. The whole territory of Northwest Territories, 45,000 people total. Babes in arms, old folks like me. And the other issue that I missed when I was talking about the big issues here, language, culture, racism. We have 11 official languages. Money is only spent on English and French. And the only reason it's spent on French is to get money from the feds, okay? Because it's French and there's a French minor, about 10% French here. But people like me who speak English, who read, who have an ability to, not too great, I'm not a good writer, but something, but to speak English to the English-speaking civil servants and ministers, have an advantage, shall we say, have a privilege, shall we say. And there's an old, now it's lost me, but there's a duty when you have knowledge to use knowledge. And I find myself, by circumstances, to be in the situation, not on income assistance, because boy, they're even worse. They're even worse here.
George.
Enough? Okay, I got it.
In the nicest way possible. There's going to be a lot of time, not today necessarily, but before you even joined, we were talking about, and we'll talk about this as the last agenda item, but a communications means for this group, so these conversations can continue and amongst yourselves and with us as well. So
absolutely, all in favor of that. The last closing thing is I just happened to hear somebody about social media. I am a teacher. I have taught most of my life. I am now into social media. You get my coordinates, get in touch with me. I'll help you learn anything I can from here. Because I am also kind of not retired, freelance, getting any work I can.
We'll
In other
use
words-
you.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Okay,
That's it.
thank you,
Okay,
George.
bye-bye.
Great. So Deanna wanted to try to speak again. Deanna, do you want to try to see if we can hear you? No, Deanna, sorry, we can't hear you. So if you do type in into the chat box your introduction, we'll be able to, I mean, depending on when we receive it, either the group will just be able to read it, or I will read it out loud. So Deanna said that she is going to, I said Deanna, I meant Deanna, is going to send us her message. Okay, so I think it's time to move on the agenda. Jeff, did you want to, oh, I think it's my turn to introduce that part, right? Our next piece.
Yeah, just maybe before moving on, did we miss anyone? Did anyone not have a chance to say hello?
Great question.
Okay, I think that was it. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you. It was great not only to meet everyone in that sense, but also just to get a sense of, you know, your inspiration for coming to this program. So thank you. I think in this next session, and I'll pass it over back to Dominica in a moment, this next session, really the purpose is to drill down a little bit more from what you described in terms of what it is you're looking for from this program. So in the next couple minutes, probably 15 or 20 minutes or so, we want to get a sense from you of really two questions. One is if there are any other more specific topics, skill sets, soft skills, hard skills, anything more specific that you are hoping to get or you would like to see from this program. And then second, if there are any kinds of resources, whether it be written, whether it be speakers, if so, if there's particular types of speakers that you could recommend that would again bring value to you and would be, you know, of benefit to you as part of this program. So I'll pass that back over to Dominica just to kind of for the format of this discussion, and but that's just essentially what this next topic is about.
Welcome back, everybody. All right, I think that should be the entire group. Okay. Hi, Hillary. Hillary, I'm just gonna mute your phone, okay? So we're just getting some feedback. Well, thank you for the breakout sessions. Jeff, I don't know if you experienced the same thing, but we definitely did not have enough time. How about yourself?
There was a little bit of a rush right at the end once we saw the countdown clock start up. But I'll just mention, Dominica, Yuri's going to report from that group.
Awesome. Sorry, we rushed into ours so quickly. I didn't even ask if anyone wanted to report. I don't mind reporting. I took notes, but if any of my group wants to report or wants to fill in any of my blanks, please just wave at us and unmute yourself and be like, no, she's wrong. This is what I meant, or this is what she missed. So maybe we'll start with Jeff's group and we'll have Yuri speak to the things that were shared in that group. Yuri, take it away.
We had quite a range of topics discussed, but two in particular that stood out were federal policy skill set, learning about the federal government and how the policies impact social and community housing across the country and affordable housing. And the second big one was leadership skills, how we can become better leaders in both soft skills and more broader sets. Some other topics that we had discussed were learning about CHRA, kind of a basic what do you do and how does it impact tenants and members of co-ops. Affordable Housing 101, there's some newer people here, so what are the basics that people should know, leaders should know about affordable housing? Discussions about housing first and supportive housing and how they interact and successes and challenges with that. Aging in place, conflict resolution, mental health resources, I guess, and then success resources would be mental health resources, specifics of personal experiences in co-ops. I think there's a lot of knowledge in this group, and if we can share with one another our best practices or our success stories as well as our challenges, there's a lot of learning that we can be done both, and questions that we have for one another. We have lots of people who are experienced and some people who are new, and sometimes it's good for experienced people to hear the questions from new people because we forget what it's like to be a new member. Again, kind of back to the CRHA resources that they provide. And I guess generally success stories related to tenant leadership and what being a tenant leader and a co-op leader means, and beyond the kind of run for the board or speak to your MP, but like how can you be a leader in your own community? So those are some of the things we discussed. Yeah. If I missed anything, please chime in.
Thank you, Yuri. Okay, so I'll summarize our groups, and like I said, my group can jump in. We had, I think Yuri and that breakout room covered a lot, and a lot of the topics that were identified through our group as well. But I'll just kind of go through our list, and like I said, my group can jump in whenever. So like Yuri mentioned, more information and how to share that information to both government, but also the public around what co-op housing is, and how the co-op housing model is a great model that's not known or not as fairly known as affordable housing in general in the country. And so how it could be explained and marketed to politicians, but also to the general public. Also learning to, so this is a more soft skill, but public speaking, and also learning to speak up more, especially learning ways to encourage others to be more concise and use less space. And so how then that you can then use more space. Also policy issues in general. So how to influence policy, how to advocate for change, how policy is made and how it's influenced is something that was brought up by our group as well. Also, if putting together a clear vision or goal, if a group is looking to expand housing or to help as tenant leaders to expand their, whether it's co-ops or other projects, and also how to put together groups locally. How do you even find the right people, and how do you find the right skill sets to bring those groups together? So that's around that strat planning skill. And then also the right to affordable housing. So not just a right to housing, but a discussion and more information and how to advocate for a right to affordable housing for all. That was an important part there, for all. And I already mentioned educating people on what co-op housing is. Learning more about the harm reduction model for housing, what that means. So I think that's that fits with part of the supportive housing, what Yuri was saying. And I'm trying to see, I don't want to miss anything. What co-op housing, expanding the notion of affordable homes. Yeah, I've mentioned that. And the big one too is cutting through red tape when applying for government funding, because we have some co-ops here who have experience with our favorite, Jeff, the co-investment fund, and spending a lot of money and resources when they do not have those money and resources to try to successfully receive funding. So that's something I think that fits in what the other group was saying. So I think those are the main things. Please let me know, did I miss anything? Oh yeah, and Eddie had said at the end to ensure, and this was a big one too, so to address stigma that affordable housing is like a ghetto. And that's something, so it's back to that YIMBY versus NIMBY, and how do we expand that nationally. So I believe, anyone from my group want to throw anything in there? I see some people typing in here. So Terry is saying, okay, deeply affordable and still livable. Jeff, do you want to move on to, I think we're good to move on unless anyone has anything to add.
So I'll just say
Oh,
first of all,
hold on, Jeff. Someone was speaking, but very quietly. Deanna, is that you?
Yeah, I was just saying, I think we also have to start looking at it not just as housing, that's more of a shell, but as a home. How do we make it a home?
Okay, so Deanna was saying that we have to look also beyond housing just as housing, but making it a home. So include, like, I assume also including all the supports that are necessary with a home, and the neighborhood and the community, all of those pieces, and not just look at 4 walls and a roof.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Deanna. Jeff.
Yeah,
Being
so,
cognizant of the time.
yeah, so first of all, thank you everyone for that feedback. That's, I mean, incredibly valuable. So just in terms of what we're going to be doing with this is we're going to essentially condense the thoughts that you've just provided, both in your introductions and through this discussion, and use that to develop a bit of a framework for the next couple months, over and above what we had already mentioned about yeah, exactly. Over and above the sort of the leadership session that we had described, as well as the housing course. And I think based on the feedback, there's pretty much universal support for some course and some more resources and education on housing policy writ large. So we'll come back to you with some additional suggestions in terms of what the remainder of the program will look like, again, based on the feedback that you've just provided. So thank you for that. The very last kind of business item we wanted to take care of in the sort of 14 minutes we have left is, I know in the group that I was part of, there was a lot of discussion about how this group can really learn from each other, and how just having some connections and conversations amongst yourself there's value in that in and of itself. So we wanted to create some kind of a system whereby all of you had the opportunity to connect with each other on an ongoing basis. And I'll admit, I'm not a tech guy. I'm not sort of the best way to do that. But, just in terms of my basic knowledge, we had thought of things like a Facebook group, if everyone happens to be on Facebook. Dominica, who's much more familiar with this stuff, had suggested, I believe, like a Google chat room or something like that. Would folks be comfortable, and would everyone be okay with that kind of a virtual chat room so that you can have the conversations kind of on an ongoing basis? I'm seeing folks on the chat saying yes. And there appears to be some suggestions. Some are saying a private Facebook group or Slack. I'm not.
I use Slack every day, so I'm a big fan of Slack. Facebook, the only issue with Facebook, and I assume I don't know this room well yet, but Facebook is not everyone has Facebook. That's the issue. So we don't want to force anyone to sign up especially for Facebook if they don't already have an account. But there are other chat options that are fairly easy to use, such as Slack, which you receive an email invite, and basically you do have to download an app either onto your computer or onto your phone, and then there's a group that would be the tenant leadership group, and you can have private chats or you can have group chats, whatever it is. You can also have one-on-one video chats. It's all there, so that is a possibility. There are others like Google Chat. What we really want to know is if everyone's okay with that, and if they are, then I'm just reading. Slack or WhatsApp would be great. So I'll kind of go through I have been already, but I'll go through all the pros and cons of the various chat options and move that forward. What I wanted to ask though about chats is, I'm going to assume I know the answer to this, but we all prefer chat over discussion forums, correct? Okay, all right, I'm seeing nodding and finger is up, so perfect. Okay, and lots of yeses.
So I think then, Dominica, what we can do, it sounds like a couple of people have heard of this Slack thing. I personally haven't, but it sounds like it's pretty easy to get onto. So over the next couple days or week or so, we'll get back to everyone with, with the instructions on how to join up to this thing. And then you can have an opportunity to connect with each other sort of on an ongoing basis. The other thing is, again, in the discussion we had, at least in the group I was a part of, but also based on what the feedback we've heard, that there are some documents, some written resources, there are some online other documents that are available that could be of use. And so we'd like to sort of collect all those and put them kind of on an online library. It's not, of course, mandatory that you review it all, but it's all there. If there are things that you may want to reference, or if you have a particular interest in something, you can access those documents. So, Dominique, I think we have some solutions for like an online library, which is really easy. So if any of you do have like online libraries, or if you have any like documents or resources that you'd like to share with everyone, if you could maybe send those to Dominica, and Dominica will figure out kind of the best way to make those available. But again, that'll be sort of like a one-stop shop for, for various resources that can help support you.
Excuse me. I find that most people like it if whatever resource you're using also includes an email that gets sent, because then people who are not so familiar with the internet and all the apps can just read an email and reply by email. I'm willing to try anything I haven't tried with the documents, and with sharing any place in a chat that you can share links, that documents can be placed, and that someone, may possibly one of you folks, the organizers, can then harvest and share on something like a website so that the general public can get access to it, is fine by me. This is all assuming that we're all okay with being quoted, or we have some kind of system where this is not for distribution, but I would need to say, as opposed to, hey, tell everybody about this.
No, that's exactly right. And by the way, George, I'm like you. I'm not computer, and a couple of people have said, they're not computer literate. I'm like that too. I'm not a fan of the computers at all. But we'll make sure that all of these, accessing all of these services and tools is made as easy as possible. And absolutely, we'll communicate this all out on email, at least to start. And then once the systems are up and running and you all have access to them, I believe some of them are pretty user friendly.
Yeah, and I think the primary mode of communication will still be email. So like the primary mode of communication from us to tell you things about like meetings that are coming up and whatnot will still be email. So you don't have to worry about missing anything. Yeah. Any other comments or questions about the communications piece? Perfect.
If I send too much stuff, this is George, if I send too much stuff, let me know.
Okay, George. just send it to me directly. Don't send it to the whole group yet, and I'll be putting it into the library.
Well, not here now. But
no, I know.
That, that kind of stuff. I'm sorry. I already share a lot of information via social media, and my interests are very similar, some of them, to this group. So as soon as you get something set up, please tell me if I'm doing too much.
Thank you, George.
So I know a couple people have to get running, and we're just about at time. It's about 3 o'clock here in the east, and what would that be, about noon hour out west? So understand. So first of all, thank you all so much again for taking part in this program. Thank you for taking part in for taking some time today to share with us your thoughts. As Dominica mentioned, we will get back to everyone via email to set up a couple of these communication systems. We'll also get back to everyone with on email with a date for the next meeting. And as I say, that next session will almost certainly be focused on leadership development, which a number of you mentioned would be of use. And then over the next few weeks, we'll get back in touch again really setting forth the more long-term agenda for this program. Again, taking into account the feedback that you've provided today. So I don't want to take up much more of your time. Is there any final comments before we break?
I have one.
Mm-hmm.
Because of my work schedule, in order to come to this meeting today, I had to go into work at 1 o'clock in the morning in order to be here on time. I can't keep doing that because my boss will get quite upset. So all these sessions, I think I'd asked Dominica earlier, I will be able to access them whenever, at any time.
Yes, they will be recorded. Yes. Yeah. Like I said, these sessions, the only thing that is not recorded is the discussions in the breakout rooms. Those are the only pieces that are not recorded. Everything else, and if we do have a presenter or a course or anything like that, it will be recorded and available after.
Great, thank you.
And that's also where we hope that ongoing chat function can help. If after reviewing a presentation at any time of the day, folks want to talk about it more or have questions, etc., you'll be able to do it pretty much 24/7. Because we want to be respectful of your time, and we know that not everyone has the same time opportunities. So we'll be as flexible as possible in that respect.
But for most of these sessions, like the live sessions, they will be happening in the middle of the Eastern time zone, just because it hits the West and the East best at that point. So the live sessions will be happening, but recording will be available. Yeah.
Right. Well, with that, folks, again, thank you so much. It was great to meet you all in this format, virtually at least. Let's all cross our fingers that our Newfoundland conference can take part so we can actually meet face-to-face in a couple months' time. And with that, enjoy the rest of your July, and we'll chat with you all online. So have a great rest of the day, folks. Thank you.
Everyone.
Stay safe. Stay
Thanks,
safe.
George.
Bye,
everybody.
Bye.